Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Rachel Shabby and the chief executive of think tank Localis, Liam Booth-Smith. So let's see what's on some of those front pages now. The Observer leads with students joining forces across the UK to demand a referendum on any final Brexit deal, as they're worried about their futures once Britain leaves the EU. The Sunday Telegraph reports that at least a dozen of Theresa May's cabinet are going to block her plans for a new customs partnership with the European Union. Home Secretary Sajid Javid poses with a sniffer dog on the front of the Mirror after police were called when drugs were found in a toilet in his department. The front page of the Sunday Times is all about the 2018 Rich List. Robots are set to care for the elderly, according to the Express. And The Sun leads with the headline, Serial Killer Nielsen Dead. The Mail on Sunday claims to have obtained footage which shows Meghan Markle's dad caught on CCTV posing for fake photographs which have been sold to papers around the world. The Daily Star on Sunday goes with a story about Ant McPartlin's divorce. And we're joined tonight by the journalist and author Rachel Shabby and the chief executive of think tank Localis, Liam Booth-Smith. Thanks very much indeed for being with us, dragging yourself away for Eurovision, which we will have more on in a little bit. But we're going to start with the Sunday Times and the Rich List. Remarkable figure, and 94% of those on the Rich List are self-made entrepreneurs.
Yeah, apparently. This is the self-made Rich List this year. We've got people like the tycoon behind the chemical giant Ienos, is it?
Ineos?
Ineos.
Yeah.
Ineos,
Yes.
who started the business age 40 and is now the first British-born industrialist to the Rich List. We've also got Daniel Craig, and we've got Jamie Oliver falling out of the Rich List, even though he's been in it for 9 years. But it is a Rich List of increasing wealth among the rich. This year sees their combined wealth of the wealthiest 1,000 rise to 724 billion, up 10% on last year's record of 658 billion. So it will jar for many of us who are, of course, not in a situation remotely resembling that. We are a country of great wealth inequalities. We are one of the most unequal societies in Western Europe in terms of wealth, even though we are also one of the wealthiest. So it is clearly a social problem. And, you know, with so many of us dealing with stagnating wages and precarious work, it will feel like we are living in an economic system that is programmed to reward the few at the top. And certainly the Conservatives' policies over the last 10 years would appear to be designed to have produced this result.
A lot to go at there, I suppose, isn't there, in response? I think the first bit that we'll start on a point of consensus, because that's always nice. The notion that anyone is self-made, I don't agree with. We're all the product of other people's kindnesses. So their energy, creativity, effort, bravery, luck is what gets these people there, and we should definitely celebrate that. So the point should be that we can celebrate wealth, but we shouldn't venerate it in the way that kind of, you know, a big Rich List suggests. So I think we're on that one. I think we probably have a point of agreement. The kind of the strong sort of political push against this, though, I don't agree with, because I think that, the way the Labour Party have chosen to politicise this issue, I think is quite nasty. I think it's quite negative. I think it's quite divisive. There's also reports in the papers in other stories which have unnamed Labour MPs coming out against John Trickett, who's speaking tomorrow at an event, attacking the rich for pinching wealth from people, he says here. Also, as well, there is a point about, I guess, the levels of inequality. Yes, we have high degrees of inequality in wealth. But, you know, in the last 10 years, or since 2010, the number of people living in absolute poverty has fallen by 1 million. Actually, income inequality, according to the IFS last year, has actually fallen since 2007, 2008. I'll grant you, wealth inequality has increased from 61 on the Gini coefficient, from 61 to 63. So, I mean, I think the story isn't so much that there's been a huge rise in inequality in wealth over the time of the Tory government. I think actually, well, you know, we can debate this, but I think it's been relatively stable. Whether that's too high or not is a separate conversation. But the idea that under the Conservatives there's been this huge, dramatic increase in income inequality, I don't think is true.
Is there a story about social mobility, though, here? When you look at some of these stories, and without wishing to sound like I'm on a TV talent show, there are some quite interesting backstories here, aren't there? There's Tony Pidgley, a Barnardo's orphan who spent his early life in a disused railway carriage, has amassed £310 million wealth via house building. The self-proclaimed proud gypsy Alfie Best, who's assembled £250 million fortune from caravans and holiday parks. And Penny Streeter, who's really interesting, founded a recruitment firm, Ambition, as a single mum living in a homeless refuge.
Yeah, and these are terrific stories, and it's not to take anything away from those stories to say... I mean, it's really weird to say don't politicise something as political as wealth inequality.
Who said don't politicise
You just did. You said that the Labour Party was politicising the rich list. It's like
the way they're doing it, don't tell people that the wealthy are stealing from everybody else.
Look, the system is clearly designed in such a way that money is flowing to the very few at the top of society. That's just a fact. We can see that by the way the wealth inequalities map out. The Resolution Foundation last year found that 1% of adults own 14% of national wealth. You cannot look at that statistic and not realise that we have a system designed to create that. It hasn't happened by accident. And when you look at the kind of things that the Conservatives are doing, they've lowered the rate of corporation tax, they've lowered the higher tax wealth threshold.
They've also raised the threshold at the bottom level. They've also increased the minimum wage.
But these are
this
things
is absolute versus relative. We can have this debate, but I mean, we'll run into each other, won't we? I'm arguing that it's absolute terms what matters.
And I'm arguing that the facts speak for themselves, and we are living in a period of very clear and stark wealth inequalities.
I'm going to interrupt that debate because I can see this is going to go on for the rest of the newspaper review if we don't. Let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph and have a look at another story there. Brexit. Theresa May's plans for a customs partnership. Dozen ministers deserting her.
So this story is all about the growing number of people within Theresa May's cabinet who are moving against her sort of hybrid compromise option of a customs partnership, which it's not quite clear sort of what that involves in terms of the practical detail. But the important bit of the story is that the hard Brexiteer group within the cabinet are now peeling off sort of previously Remain backing cabinet members to support what their option is, which they call maximum facilitation. I have one huge concern about this more than anything else, actually, which is that it seems to be based, the success of maximum facilitation seems to be based upon having a big, brand new IT system to make it work. Technology is going to be the answer. And whenever I put government and big IT technology system together, it never really comes up with a happy answer.
Alarm bells ringing, and they must be for Theresa May, who's, according to several of these Sunday papers, she's imploring the Brexit rebels. She's trying to say to them, look, trust me, I'm not going to let you down. This deal's going to be great. I'm going to deliver what you want, but you have to compromise. And it feels like, you know, this is such an excruciating process to watch because they are so irrevocably divided over this. The Conservative Party is split categorically over Brexit, and there is a core of quite fundamentalist elements of the Leave wing who are absolutely adamant that Brexit has to look like exactly what they want it to look like, and it can't. It just simply cannot do that, not practically, because Parliament wouldn't do it, because the population doesn't want it, because business doesn't want it, and because Europe won't allow it. It just won't happen. And it just seems to be, they just seem to be banging on about this, refusing to back down, but also, you know, dragging us all into it. I mean, they're essentially, you know, we're just hobbled by it as a country. We're we're waiting for them to reach a consensus, which they don't seem able to reach. And it seems a very irresponsible way to govern.
And in terms of that consensus and what the future deal might look like, students calling for a vote on that deal.
Yeah, this story is a front page of The Observer, and it's all about the student groups from across the country coming together to be part of the sort of growing demands for a vote on the Brexit deal. And the argument here is simply that there are about 1.4 million people who were too young to vote in the EU referendum, but they would be able to vote on the deal, the outcome of whatever is agreed. I'm always a little bit sceptical of these things because I don't think they're particularly representative, actually. It says that there's 1 million young people being represented here. Actually, there's 120 elected student officers.
Rachel, just a brief word from you before we go to the break.
I mean, look, I think if young people felt that they weren't being represented, then we would hear about it. It's clear that young people overwhelmingly did not vote to leave, but they will be the ones who will most be affected by it going forward. And I do think it's perfectly reasonable for them and other groups, it's not just young people, saying we should have a people's vote on the deal, on the actual deal, that we should be allowed to decide whether that's a good deal, whether we should get a better one, or whether we should just not bother. That's a reasonable thing to say.
But the university students, so it's not all young people, it's a self-selecting
No,
group, of course.
I was widening this out by saying that lots of people find this a reasonable position.
OK, and we're going to look inside the Sunday Express now. Story that has been dominating my Twitter feed and our conversations in the breaks, I have to admit. Eurovision, the stage invasion during the UK's entry. Yeah. And some thought that we might get the sympathy vote, but...
Turns out the sympathy vote meant we didn't come last. So that's something.
Small
right?
victories, right?
Yeah, you've got to take your victories where you can.
The real story is Portugal, didn't they finish bottom, is what we've heard, because they clearly didn't want to host it next year.
The hosts, yes.
Yeah. There you go.
I didn't see it because I was on air, but what did you think of our...
I thought she was amazing. The way because obviously she had someone come and a stage attack, which must have been terrifying. And she responded so professionally. It was just extraordinary to watch her just calmly carry on performing the song. So she obviously gets full kudos for that, and for the effort, which is clearly in no way the points clearly in no way reflect that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They had in here as well. The story in the Express says that Suri was highlighted as a potential kind of. Something might happen, a risk associated around her attendance there. So there has apparently been sort of special elite former SAS soldiers as guards who must have been having a cup of tea and a biscuit or something while she was on stage. I mean, it's or whoever's responsible. It's a major event. I find it quite shocking that someone was able to get on stage there.
Breach.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just her. It was 11 countries identified as prime targets for IS killers, given extra security. But as you say, somebody still did manage to get on stage, has now been arrested. There are numerous reports circulating about who this individual is. But she did carry on, but it didn't help. UK coming in third from bottom and Israel winning, but you approved of that decision.
I mean, I think it was a great song, and it's obviously reflective of a Me Too moment, which she delivered really well. So, yeah, I think that was a deserved win.
Worthy winner.
Let's have a look at the Sunday Times. Protocol at the palace. Meghan Markle shaking it up.
Hugging people.
Hugging people. The horror.
I know. Shock horror of it.
Palace must be mortified. Can you imagine?
Clearly is. She said, though, doesn't it, in the story, she says, well, I'm American, so I hug. I thought about this.
This is the difference between the stiff upper lip.
It is, but I thought about this. Originally, I thought, oh, yeah, I'm definitely sort of I'm a hugger. Why not say the right thing? And then the more I think about it, the truth is, I don't think I am, actually. I'm a bit more reserved than that. I don't think I'm an instant hugger. I think kind of maybe get to know someone a bit better.
Right. Maybe the Markle vibe will change you and make you a hugger too.
Maybe.
I mean, Prince Harry's quite informal as well in the way in which he interacts with the public, isn't it? And he's been encouraging them to go over and give her a hug. And I think the thing that we're probably seeing with this couple is they're going to do it their way.
Yeah, and you're right that he has sort of changed the vibe as well, and he and his brother have done, I think, a really good job of, talking about mental health issues and grief and those kind of things that, usually aren't stiff upper lip territory, are they? And I sort of think they deserve credit for bringing public attention and awareness to those issues.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it does look like they're going to continue to shake things up
And
in
also
that way.
doing things their way with their choice of the bishop to give the address during the
Yeah, it's a
ceremony.
bit of a political statement, I think, and it may not to people seem like that big a deal. The person will have his own kind of political history there. I think what it is an institution like the monarchy is all about stability. So that means even the smallest amount of change is going to feel quite radical. I think that's what we're pushing up against here. Even a hug feels just a step too far for some.
It's a step too far, is it? Does it feel like that
Not for
you?
me, no. Well, personally,
It does,
maybe.
doesn't
it?
But you know what it is? It is.
I think there's going to be a lot of hugging in Windsor next Saturday for the royal wedding.
Well, they should be, shouldn't they, at a wedding?
Absolutely. Rachel, Liam, thank you both very much indeed.
Let's just whiz through them. The Sunday Telegraph has a Brexit story. Dozen ministers desert May on customs. The Observer has a different angle. 1 million students join calls for vote on Brexit deal. That's student unions backing that call. The Sunday Times, interestingly, although it has an interview with the Prime Minister or has an article by her, chooses to lead on its famous rich list. At last, the self-made rich triumph over old money. And the Mail on Sunday reveals exclusively, it says, that Meghan's dad staged the photos with the paparazzi. Well, with that and more from the papers, we're joined by Chloe Wesley, by Ellie May O'Hagan and Camilla Long. And first of all, Chloe, what caught your eye? Brexit, I assume.
Yeah, I went for the Brexit story. So there's a story on the front page of the Telegraph about ministers taking issue with this new customs partnership. And the reason why they're taking issue is because this new customs partnership would inhibit the UK's ability to sign trade deals with other countries. It's very difficult to see how it differs all that much from customs union memberships. There's a big discussion about this.
So people like you on the right of politics, you work for the Taxpayers Alliance, are basically saying we want to cut free properly. We don't want a halfway
Exactly,
house.
there are huge opportunities. I mean, if we leave the customs union, we can lower tariffs on food, which would lower the cost of food by about, it's estimated, 17%. So there are huge opportunities for people.
Now, in your paper, the Sunday Times,
Yes.
Camilla, you have the Prime Minister herself, but
Yes.
you're not excited enough about her to put her as the front page splash.
Well, they did put her in my slot, so when I woke up this morning, I was a bit surprised to see I'd been replaced so quickly. But
She's not nearly so lively as she
Well,
nowadays.
I'm not worried. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. She's written a piece which is sort of firm Theresa, but as we know, sort of firm Theresa is always followed by hopeless and indecisive Theresa. So at the start, she says we are going to leave. It sounds quite Brexity, you know. We're going to leave the customs union. We're going to take back control of our money. We're going to take back control of our borders, etc., etc. And then you sort of get to the end, and it sort of says, I will need your help and support to get there. So it sort of slightly turns quite a little bit begging and a little bit sort of, you know, we're all in this together, maybe. You know, maybe we're all in a bit of this problem together and we're going to have to collaborate.
I think she's appealing to people like you, Chloe. She's basically saying to Brexiteers in this piece, isn't she, trust me and don't mess it up. Now, do you?
Well, she's recognising that the Leave vote was a vote to take back control of laws, borders, money and trade. But I think that the appeal is also to those on the Remain side. We do need to come together as a country. This is a huge opportunity. And we need to stop squabbling about the debate from 2 years ago and move on to what kind of country we're going to be.
Now, Ellie May, you might be enjoying the Tories' problems as a supporter of the Labour Party, but there's also a great big argument about whether Labour needs to be clearer in its policy, with the Observer saying that 1 million students, now what they've done is they've just added up all the members of student unions, so it's not quite right, so 1 million students are backing calls, particularly on Jeremy Corbyn, to give a Brexit vote.
I mean, I think that this initiative to start a grassroots Remain campaign will probably do a lot better than the current tactic that a lot of Remainers seem to be using, which is a lot of complaining and trying to reverse Brexit via legislation and the courts. And actually, I think probably I voted Remain. I would like us to stay in the EU, but I think that what happened in the referendum is that the Leave campaign ran a very persuasive campaign and the Remain campaign ran a very poor campaign. And I think that what the Remain campaign needs to do now and what Remainers need to do now is to look at where they went wrong, to understand where people are and to kind of go back to the drawing board. And I think that a grassroots student-based campaign will probably do a lot better than strange hashtags and lots of complaints, which is what they seem to be going for at the moment.
Camilla's looking
Yeah,
puzzled.
I know this looks like 1 million students joined the calls to vote for
No,
the
it is
Brexit,
it is an over-exaggerated story.
It's an exaggerated story. It's actually only about 120 representatives, I think, at the NUS, which is rather different, I think. I mean, if we look back to the referendum, if we remember the students were the ones who didn't get out of bed to vote. So, I mean, if I were, you know, Theresa May, I probably wouldn't be too frightened about this campaign at the moment.
Well, would you if you were Jeremy Corbyn, though? Anyway, do you think he'll feel the pressure? Do people who agree with you will feel the pressure and think, oh, Labour should change our policy? We think, no, we're just where we want to be, ambiguous enough to exploit the Tories' problems.
I mean, you know, this reminds me of the famous FDR quote, I like the idea, I want to do it, and I go out there and make me do it. And so really, whether Jeremy Corbyn feels pressure will come down to how successful this campaign is, really. Now,
meanwhile, you've been looking at the rich list in the Sunday Times.
Yeah, this is a big story today. It's across all the papers in one way or another. And the Sunday Times has gone for this, what I regard as quite a strange headline, at last the self-made rich triumph over old money. And I think it's just quite strange because, you know, most people on the rich list have enlarged their fortunes over the last year. And meanwhile, wages in this country are stagnating. Most people who are poor in this country are in work. A third of young people can't get a house. And so it suggests to me that while these people are incredibly, incredibly wealthy, actually the economy is broken and it does need to be redesigned.
The line that your paper chooses to go on is the fact it's the self-made, Camilla,
yes,
who are there. It's not hereditary wealth.
And the man who's at the top of the list, Jim Ratcliffe, is not somebody who's been on the rich list forever and ever and ever. He was born in a Manchester council.
800 jobs and cancel union agreements and initiate a 3-year pay freeze on his employees. Like, he is somebody who has become rich off the back of his employees by deteriorating their conditions, lowering their wages. He's got rich at the expense of his employees, not to their benefit, and I think that's really important to make that clear.
What do you think is the significance of the fact that it's slightly patronising to people who go to comprehensive schools on the grounds that most people go to comprehensive schools, say comprehensive school boy gets rich?
I don't think it's patronising at all. I think we have to accept that everybody in the rich list, however far back you go, are, you know, they're self-made. So this is how rich is, you know. And if you object to riches, if you object to people accumulating wealth, then obviously anything to do with the rich list is going to revolt you.
I think I think people object to gross unfairness, and I think that's what this story is about. It's grotesque.
Now, talking hereditary wealth.
Yes.
Let's turn to the royals, shall we?
Yes.
As we build up towards the royal
yes.
wedding, there's a nice front page, you've got it there, haven't you?
Yes.
Of the Mail on Sunday.
So this is the story about Meghan Markle's father, who I had quite a soft spot for because he seemed rather sweet. And here we are, these pictures of him having himself, you know, measured up for a suit, trying to get in shape for the wedding. Apparently they're all staged. It's stunning. I mean, I would never have guessed that with the hankies in the background was staged, but apparently it is. And of course, the kicker on this is that the palace have been very firm about staying away from Meghan Markle's family. Only yesterday, I think there was a notice issued to say, please, can you stay away from Thomas Markle? It seems, little did the palace know, that Thomas Markle was perfectly capable of dealing with the press himself.
We should say that
yes.
He insists that these were not staged.
Yes.
Would you be shocked at the suggestion that they were?
No, I just think poor Meghan, you know, having this in the press and all of her family history, like, it's a lot of pressure that she's under. I'm very much looking forward to the royal wedding. I think it's going to be a great day. Everyone's going to be celebrating.
But is it still on FA Cup final day? Because that is a difficult
it is,
dilemma.
yes, it remains on FA Cup final day, and I think...
You're going to be torn?
Yeah.
I love Meghan Markle and football.
I'm going to be watching the cup final, though. You can just squeeze in a bit of both, I'm told.
Yes.
But it won't stop me going to Wembley. Now, finally, last night, were you glued to the telly?
I was. I watched the whole thing from beginning to end.
Yeah?
So I'm quite tired this morning.
Were you surprised? I mean, I have to say, I had to go to bed early in order to do this. I missed it.
You missed out on Cyprus, which I still maintain was the best entry, and I got them in the sweepstakes.
Well,
and Australia.
Israel's song is pretty...
Australia was... I loved her dress.
Yeah,
Australia was
great
Israel's
song.
pretty quirky, wasn't it?
very different.
I particularly enjoyed the stage invasion because, of course, with all light entertainment, there needs to be somebody throwing themselves across the stage like Crufts when that man came and tried to steal the dog, which was brilliant.
I mean,
and I
Crufts
love
is
the
a
woman,
superior form of entertainment to
I love
Eurovision.
the man running up, trying to steal a microphone from the singer, which frankly should happen in nearly every act.
Now,
especially Hungary.
Yes, exactly.
You've got a story there on your iPad, I think, Camilla.
Yes, here we are. This is the stage invasion. And you can see this man who's not dressed up for the occasion is trying to take it away from her. And she said she was very brave. She powered on through and said, you know, I'm not, you know, we don't need to perform it again, you know, and everyone was very relieved.
I love the Sun on Sunday today, which finds a way to combine the stories. Its headline, Eurovision Ding Dong Conquest.
Yes.
Which is
And then
Theresa
PM,
May.
I'll quit the,
Theresa May
I'll quit the
posing as
customs union.
Eurovision
Yes.
singer,
Yes.
saying, I'll quit the customs
Brilliant.
union.
Finally, all of Suri's dreams have come true.
Chloe, Ellie, Camilla, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us.
The Olympics to London and improving public health has died. Her bravery in campaigning for the NHS to improve care for cancer sufferers while dying was magnificent. Now, she would have been shocked by him saying he's the bringer of peace with his unilateral withdrawal from a deal that prevents Iran from acquiring nukes. May, Merkel and Macron said he was wrong. But can they keep the Iran deal alive? Meanwhile, he lampooned May's Brexit customs plan as crazy, which she didn't think was a sackable offence. Well, now the whole world feels just a bit crazy, doesn't it, Allegra?
Crazy, but this morning it's also gone quite sombre and quiet as people digest the news of Tessa Jowell's death. There is a political development today. The Mail on Sunday goes with the kind of cross-party bridge building that Tessa would certainly have approved of. Her friend David Miliband, former Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg and our guest later, Conservative Nicky Morgan, joining together, they say, to resist the march to a hard Brexit fantasy land with this piece in the Mail on Sunday. But really, out there on social media, it's just a long ticker tape of tributes to Tessa Jowell, who died last night. Absolutely everybody describing many acts of kindness, wisdom, intelligence and political passion. She really was a force of nature. Now, the tweet that is probably the most affecting is here from her very good friend Lord Faulkner, with whom she had dinner this week. Tessa, the light that never went out. Her life and her death was about delivering all of herself for other people. She was so loved and her death is utterly devastating. Her other very, very good friend, Tony Blair, had this to say, a lengthy tribute. What she achieved was remarkable. She was the first senior politician, and this is very important, to fully understand the importance of public health and to shift health policy towards prevention of illness and not only cure. But what did Tessa Jowell herself think would be her legacy? Well, here is an interview she did when she stood down from Parliament in 2015, and here she says, I am most proud of setting up Sure Start. And so we found this tweet of many tweets doing the rounds this morning, but I think she would like it the most. To see a single mum, this is when Sure Start was launched, to see a single mum burst into tears after taking her one-year-old along to a newly opened centre, hugging other parents, unable to comprehend that the service was free. Tessa Jowell would have loved that.
So I'm delighted to be joined by Lisa Nandy and John Whittingdale. I mean, what I remember about Tessa Jowell was extraordinary generosity, very helpful to me when I was first a political reporter decades ago. Lisa, how would you assess her contribution?
Well, she would have loved what Allegra just did there, because I know today that she'd be saying, don't cry, celebrate and learn and take the legacy. She first rang me back in 2010 when I was a new MP and asked me if I wanted to be her PPS on the Olympics. It was a bit of a shock. I mean, not only was I the MP for Wigan, so, you know, Olympics, but I've been very critical of the new Labour government, and she rang me typically to say, I want you to come in, I want you to learn, I want you to have the benefit of being part of a front bench team, but equally I want to hear what you've got to say. And if you think that we're getting it wrong, I care, and I think politics is enriched by that sort of debate. And I just say that the Sure Start, the Olympics programme, the public health work she did, these are her legacies, but the reason that she was able to achieve it is because of the sort of person that she was. You could never say no to Tessa. Even within the last couple of weeks, she was still contacting me through her family and through her support base to tell me about what I should be doing. Over the years, she's never stopped telling me what I should be doing, and there's just a huge Tessa-shaped hole in politics and in our personal lives today.
John, you were her shadow, weren't you, when she was Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport? How formidable was she?
Oh, she was a very effective Secretary of State. But, of course, she came to me, and one of the great things about Tessa was that she wasn't really partisan. She wanted to achieve things, and if you could help her, then she would work with anybody. And she came to me and said, I want to try and persuade the government that we should bid to host the Olympic Games. And she said, we will only succeed if we can show that there is unanimous support for this right across politics. Will you support me? And I went to my colleagues and we decided we would do so. And then I became chairman of the select committee during all the time when we were preparing for the Olympics. So I used to see her quite a lot. Just as Lisa says, she was always open to criticism. I didn't agree with her a lot of the time, but we had some good discussions, but she wasn't partisan, and we worked together very well, and she's a great loss.
I think everybody will agree with that.
Now, the news of Tessa Jowell's death came after the papers went to the presses, but we can start with our panel that we've managed to kind of wangle into our studio in the break, and by talking about her sort of life and legacy. We've got Michael Heaver of the website Westmonster, last year's Businesswoman of the Year, Fleur Sexton, and Lucy Fisher, who's the senior political correspondent at the Times. Thanks very much for being with us. Lucy, as a kind of woman working in Westminster, do you think Tessa Jowell is quite an inspirational figure to a lot of us?
Absolutely. You know, I knew Tessa a little bit. Obviously, she was a huge champion of women when she was Minister for Women, but also so kind to kind of many female MPs across the board, and also really welcoming to kind of young female journalists like myself. I think she embodied a softness while being incredibly articulate and having a kind of a core of steel. She was less kind of hard than I think perhaps an earlier generation of women had to be in Parliament.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. I think that perhaps is something, isn't it? She's quite a sort of feminine, I can use that word feminine, I don't know, but she was quite a soft and feminine, friendly politician rather than some of the MPs that we're kind of more used to, I think. How do you think she came across Blair from someone who's kind of outside the Westminster bubble?
Well, I think for me, the Sure Start programme, the fact that that is her legacy, you know, and something that she says how proud she was of that as well. I think that's really important for women. You know, what Lucy was saying about supporting women, I think that really comes across. You know, women in business, women in their careers. I think that was something that was really important to her and a fantastic legacy.
And you probably didn't share that many political similarities with Tessa, would it be fair to say? But at the same time, I think what struck me, actually, about the tributes this morning is there's such a lot of cross-party feeling towards her. She was someone who kind of worked across party divides on things like the Olympics to try and get stuff done.
That's it, yeah. Clearly a very decent human being, people saying that, you know, she got along with people across the aisle. And also, I think, what a legacy in terms of the Olympics. What a thing to have been a part of and played such a major role in. And it's an amazing piece of history that she was a part of for that.
Yeah, and a lot of people will really remember the things I went to at the Olympics, you know, lived in East London at times. And what a kind of joyful piece of history to be a part of. I think a lot of politicians probably couldn't quite say the same thing. I think her dignity in death is something else that really struck me. You know, that amazing speech that she gave in the House of Lords about, like, living her life with lots of vigour, even though she had this diagnosis. Really moving.
Absolutely. I mean, watching the footage of it this morning brought a tear back to my eye. I mean, dignity is the word, as you say, and talking about the uncomfortable facts around having cancer and not only sort of living with it, but looking at how you might die with it and kind of palliative care. I think addressing some of those really tricky problems that sometimes people like to shy away from an ostrich about because they're so difficult.
Yeah, very important stuff. Now, the papers haven't got anything about her death in them because obviously it was announced this morning. So should we have a quick look at what else they are covering this morning? The Sunday Telegraph has got the headline, "Dozen Ministers Desert May on Customs." What's this story all about now?
Yeah, so we've got this so-called customs partnership, which has seemed to be a bit of a soft option that Theresa May is said to favour, and increasing opposition from her own ministers. The Telegraph saying about 12 of 28 individuals who sit in the Cabinet, but it could be as high as 15 actually oppose this. Very interesting as well, they've got a Remain voting minister quota saying if we're leaving, do it properly, backing the maximum facilitation option, that's what they call it, to basically ensure that the UK has a fully independent trade policy moving forward. Now, I think the customs partnership's dead anyway for the reason that Boris Johnson has called it crazy and Jacob Rees-Mogg has called it cretinous.
Yeah, but just because Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg don't like it, they're not Prime Minister, are they? So they can't just veto it, surely?
No, sure, but I'm coming from the aspect of Theresa May is in a quite vulnerable position, and if Boris Johnson, say, was to resign and Jacob Rees-Mogg was to turn his fire on the government, I think they'd be in big trouble. And I think where this is all heading, and obviously Theresa May has written a piece today as well, is can the government get their stated policy through Parliament? Because I'm not convinced. When you look at Conservative Remainers, there's about, let's say, about a dozen of them, plus the Lib Dems, plus Labour, plus the SNP, all opposing leaving the customs union. Theresa May today says to the public, a bit of a plea, I need your support. Can the government actually get through their Brexit policy? Because I'm not convinced, and I think we could be headed for general election.
Blimey. Please.
Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's how it is.
It feels like about 2 minutes since the last one.
Yeah, I know, right? But you know, it's a very interesting position of can the government get leaving the customs union? Now we've got Labour's position. Now we've got people like Anna Soubry and Dominic Grieve, Conservative MPs. If they vote to block that, the government, as I see it, cannot get their Brexit policy through the House of Commons. If they can't do that, we have to have an election.
Now let's put aside the kind of intricacies of max FAC versus customs partnerships. On the surface, this sounds quite worrying if what you're saying is true, because we've had years now, a couple of years almost, to try and get our kind of ducks in a line. For a businesswoman, you must be looking at all this thinking, crikey, how am I going to cope if we haven't got a plan?
Yeah, I think the main thing for business is clarity. You know, pretty much anything can be worked with, but we do need the clarity to see what we're working with in order to make plans and really invest in the next few years. So I really think the focus has got to be on clarity, whatever that is, you know, just so we know what we're working with. So it is quite disruptive having constant movement of what's happening and we don't quite know. So,
what's your sort of insight? Do you think that there's one option that's been favoured more than the other, or is it just really impossible to tell at the minute?
Well, I think it's difficult because Theresa May has stated her preference in her Brexit War Cabinet, a smaller committee of kind of key cabinet members for the customs partnership option. Ministers openly defied her in that meeting. There was a majority for the max FAC option. She's now sent 2 working groups out to kind of look at how they could rework, redevise either option so that it was more palatable. I think Michael's absolutely right. She's caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, she's got a number of very hardline Brexiteers, numbering around 60-odd, above the threshold needed, about 48, to trigger a leadership contest against her if she doesn't do what they want. On the other hand, in the Commons, the numbers are there for a softer Brexit, so she can't seem to force one way or the other.
Moving on from Brexit, sometimes it feels like this is all we get to talk about in these reviews. So I'm quite keen to talk about a couple of other stories I think we can do at the same time. So we've got the Sunday Times Rich List, which is celebrating the fact that the self-made rich are triumphing over old money with the kind of entrepreneurs building things from nothing. And then the Mail on Sunday have got this key Corbyn ally, will bring the UK's wealthy elite to a shuddering halt. Now, that's John Trickett, who I also interviewed earlier on in the programme, who was basically saying that there's a rigged system, that the rich are getting richer and everyone else is losing out. What's your kind of feeling on it?
Well, no, look, I think Labour's anti-aspiration rhetoric, I don't like it at all. I think when you look at the rich list today, Jim Ratcliffe, who tops the rich list with wealth calculated at 21 billion. I mean, he's not done badly for himself.
Not to be sniffed at.
No, grew up in a councillor house and went to a grammar school. And I think that is an incredibly positive message. And actually, when the Tories talk about grammar schools and Theresa May talk about grammar schools, he's the type of person they should point to. There is someone who I believe, under the present comprehensive system, who grew up in a council house. I don't think you'll see many people like under the current system go on to become billionaires. And I think grammar schools, you know, what a story, Jim Ratcliffe, that amount of money. And I think Labour are in the position now where they're becoming an anti-aspiration party when they should be championing things like grammar schools to help the poorest get on in life.
Do you think Labour's anti-aspiration?
I don't necessarily think it's anti-aspiration. I think it doesn't give the impression that they are necessarily supporting people to make these journeys, because these journeys are entirely possible. So I think what we need to do, whatever party it is, we need to be taking people like Jim and looking at how we can use this to fuel ambition, because one of the things he says that I think is fantastic is that he had this it was this industrial society when he was at university, and they went out and they went to see the way manufacturing worked. And I think having these links between schools and businesses, role models, all this sense of work experience, it can really ignite passion and get people really excited about work. And I think those are the sorts of things we need to be focusing on, and really getting young people and people who are unemployed. I mean, Jim was unemployed. He went into his first job, and then apparently he was sacked because he had eczema and he couldn't work with chemicals, they said. And he was, he came from a council house. He didn't start his first business till he was 40. So all of these things that you would think would hold somebody back, I think we really need to be celebrating this journey and how possible it is for other people to go on this same journey, because that's a great thing for our country, the fact that you can do that sort of thing. It's life-changing and amazing.
Are things really getting harder? I wonder. I mean, in London, for example, there's a lot of really great school success stories in academies, for example, in difficult areas. What do you think? Sometimes we can be a bit gloomy about all this, can't we?
I think things are getting harder. I think there are different metrics, and the government obviously tends to point out jobs statistics are great, employment's at a record high, unemployment is at a kind of a record low, but wages have been squeezed for a long time now, and I think investment in the economy has been fairly poor. That said, I'm not sure that many people across the country would recognise John Trickett's picture of this as a kind of a society on the brink of revolt. And I think that is shown by the general election results in the past week. You know, in fact, Labour fell short of expectation and the Tory vote really held up. So while he's trying to kind of stir up a lot of agitation, and I think there is concern about inequality, there is concern about frozen and backsliding wages, it's not quite as serious a problem as perhaps Labour would like to make out.
Interesting, Sal. Thanks very much for your thoughts on a big range of stories this morning. Thank you.
Now, as we saw in Eurovision last night, even the most slick European get-togethers can go wrong and the stars can be upstaged. But that wasn't the only bit of international diplomacy that was under strain this week. This week, politics has been rocked by splits and the rumbling threat of war. The blonde one was trying to calm troubled waters abroad, desperately attempting to stop Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal.
Candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Trump ignored such flattery.
This disastrous deal.
And while Iranian MPs engaged in unparliamentary behaviour, the Middle East moved one step closer to conflict. But with aerospace contracts and jobs at stake,
we will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction.
Theresa May found herself back in step with EU leaders and an ocean apart from the special relationship with Trump. After trying to stop the Ayatollah splitting the atom, blonde ambition struck again and split the cabinet. He questioned the sanity of the PM's preferred course of action on post-Brexit cross-channel trade, straining further the definition of collective cabinet responsibility.
So that if a car came into the UK...
We're told the PM backs a customs partnership against the equally untested Max FAC option favoured by the Brexiteers. Making a virtue out of necessity, Theresa May has now split her Brexit war cabinet into two to look further at the two options, both of them considered unworkable by the European Commission. A suggestion from some Brexiteers that the UK might avoid a cliff edge by staying in the customs union a little longer was denounced by their leader-in-waiting.
No, of course not, and would be a dramatic failure of government policy.
The Lords shredded Mrs May's withdrawal bill, forcing MPs to vote on staying in the single market. The rule in politics is if you see a split, exploit it.
Crazy. The crazy customs partnership proposal.
Cretinous, crazy.
Last night at Eurovision, the UK again failed to get the votes it needed, as Sue Ree had to battle to stay in control. Theresa May will have to hope she fares better at her next European showdown in June. We'll be talking about the life and career of Dame Tessa Jowell a little later in the programme, but first, with our panel, we turn to the all-consuming political issue of our times, of course, Brexit. The Prime Minister's got an op-ed piece in the Sunday Times today, and it's quite interesting when you look at her language. It's all about taking back control. What was the purpose of what she was trying to say, do you think, Gabby?
She seems to be taking us back to the beginning of Brexit, to the sort of early Theresa May, who promised to deliver a Brexit, you know, a proper, full-fat, fully leaded Brexit that was, you know, what the people had voted for. And she seems to be trying to reassure us that she's in charge. Now, of course, the trouble with talking about taking back control when you're obviously not in control of your Foreign Secretary, who seems to be wandering the world criticising her customs partnership, and when you're not in control of the parliamentary process because of the Lords throwing this bill back into her lap, you know, it's very difficult to come across. It almost looks as if you're open to parodying yourself when you start talking about being in control and in charge, because that's exactly what she doesn't appear to be at the moment.
And Julia, as well as adopting some Brexiteer language in it, like take back control, there were a couple of interesting lines where she said there would have to be compromises. And she finished the article by saying, "I will need your help and support to get there." It wasn't abundantly clear whose help it was that she was looking for. How did you read that?
Well, yeah, my problem with all of this is this: I think she hasn't quite understood the job of being the Prime Minister. She's not just a Cabinet Minister, she's the Prime Cabinet Minister. And this abject failure of leadership that we're seeing, this idea of compromise, like we have to keep Remainers and Leavers happy. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You either are or you aren't. We're either leaving the EU or we're not. We all knew, and I've been arguing on my radio show all week with Remainers who seem to think that we never discuss the single market, we never discussed the customs union. I mean, I remember these discussions boring on for hour after hour, day after day, week after week during the referendum campaign. She has to actually, at some point, make a decision and stick to it and take her cabinet with her. And the fact that she's so weak, not just, I think, because of the election result last June, but actually also because of the way her personality is. She's not someone who's sort of bold and visionary and can take people with her. She's not a Tony Blair, you know, or a Margaret Thatcher in that sense. But I do think that at some point she's just going to have to pick her side and take a side. And these sort of appeals and telling everyone, you know, it's all going to be fine. At some point, we are up against a very tight deadline. She needs to actually just make the decision, take the plunge. She's going to upset Remainers in her cabinet. You know what? They can resign because they know what happens. If they bring her down, there's going to be a staunch Eurosceptic leader of the Tory party, not Theresa May. So it's not even in their interest to do that.
Steve, we saw Jeremy Corbyn there in our little summary of the week, having fun at Prime Minister's questions about the Foreign Secretary calling the customs partnership crazy. But he's got his own problems over Brexit, hasn't he, when nearly half of his peers are rebelling against what the Labour leadership wanted them to vote in the Lords, and they want to stay in a European Economic Area.
Every leader has his or her problems over Brexit, as every leader has had his or her problems over Europe. And it's true that Jeremy Corbyn's position is full of contradictions and inconsistencies as well. It's nowhere near as significant as when you're Prime Minister up against this deadline looming. And it seems to me, I mean, you were praising Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher's leadership. They equivocated over Europe all over the place. You know, Tony Blair was pro a single currency, but not really for a single currency. Margaret Thatcher conceded on the exchange rate mechanism. Everyone has had to twist and turn over Europe. The big difference now is Brexit and the scale of the complexity. And she's got so little room to manoeuvre and twist and turn, like all the other people have done over Europe. And that's why it seems to me that this is quite a seismic few weeks coming up. She can't offer a referendum like some of the others have done to get out of it. She's got very little room to move.
No, we can't leave without going back to where we started. Brexit, of course. We've been talking about it throughout the programme. The Brexit subcommittee are going to meet again this week and talk about it a bit more, although not come to a final decision about what our customs options are going to be. So what is going to happen this week, Gabby?
If I knew that, I'd be worth my paycheck. I think we're coming to crunch point, aren't we, in terms of decisions? I mean, there's no more sitting on the fence. We have the coming back of the two working groups set up by Theresa May, which is essentially, you know, she split the cabinet, like when teachers have a boisterous, noisy class to deal with and to keep them quiet. She split them into two working groups and the two options, and they both have to come back with their recommendations. And then it's a case of reconciling the fact that what Parliament will support is probably not what Cabinet will support, is probably not what the EU will support. You know, there is no option that pleases all three, and she's really going to have to choose.
We learnt something this morning, though, I think, when I was talking to Ken Clark. He seemed to signal that he would support the idea of a customs partnership, which we believe Theresa May's preferred option, Brexiteers and Cabinet don't like it, but up until now, we knew you signed an amendment saying you wanted to stay in the customs union. If rebels, potential pro-European rebels like him, can support the customs partnership in Parliament, does that help the PM?
If she can get it through the cabinet. This is what's so tantalising for her, and why in that rather curious article she said at one point, I think Julia was talking about it earlier, I need your help. Sort of pleading almost. Yeah, I think it is significant that those pro-Europeans who basically want to stay in the customs union would back her customs partnership, because if the opposition parties decided to back this as well, she might have the numbers. But it was defeated in the Brexit cabinet meeting last week. So at the moment she can't get it through her
problems as well,
Brexit committee, and of course it will cause immense problems within her party. But there is no
Julia,
solution
what would the response be from more ardent Brexiteers? Say she can get it through cabinet. Say Parliament voted for a new customs partnership. What happens then to the people who campaigned to leave?
Well, now Ian Douglas-Smith's left the building. I imagine I'm the only Brexiteer in the BBC building, aren't I? I really, this is not what I voted for, and what I think 52% of the population voted for. We're constantly told, well, we didn't know what we were voting for. I was pretty darn sure. I think most Leavers were, as most Remainers were. We were leaving the customs union, we were leaving the single market. This is the worst of both worlds, as far as I can tell. We get all of the downsides of being in the customs union and none of the upsides of leaving, like being able to make international trade deals. We talked a lot about, you know, who the Remainers and Brexiteers in cabinet, and the MPs and Parliament and the Lords. The people are the people who matter, the British voters. I think we are going to see such an incredible breakdown of trust in democracy if Prime Minister doesn't deliver on what she said when she was elected as Tory leader, what she said in her manifesto in last June, and what she should have, frankly, dealt with her cabinet a year ago.
All right. Well, thank you very much to all of you for coming in to help us pick our way through the politics of the week.